As Jack left the experts to deal with the production, he left with Denali and headed back to the hotel to have their lunch. Immediately after that, he headed towards Serenity residential area. The residential area was located about 30 minutes drive from the hotel that he had been staying with Denali. When they got there, Jack looked at the surroundings in surprise. This area didn't have many buildings. In fact, it was about 2 kilometers from the busy roads of the city. This place had a good level of security. The moment that they arrived here, they were stopped by a guard. "Yes, are you here to buy a villa?" the guard asked. "Not really. We're here to see the management," Denali replied. "That's going to be tough because you'll have to inform them about it first. This is a high-end residential area. So, there's no way that strangers can be allowed in unless they are allowed by the management or one of the person living here," the guard said. This was the policy that had only been enacted recently. So, the guard knew that many people would definitely be against the part that one had to say in advance if he wanted to buy a villa. Jack could tell that this guy wasn't bad. Had it been another person, looking at the Lamborghini that was worth a few $100,000, he would have definitely chased them away. After all, even the cheapest villa here cost about $2 million to buy it. Most of the people that came here had cars that were worth at least $1 million. As such, they were allowed entry to the residence management office. But others were definitely not allowed in because they were definitely not there to buy a villa, but to stroll around and take pictures. "Can you tell the person in charge that Jack is here?" Jack asked. Although he was suspicious of whether Jack's name would make any change, he still decided to make a call to the management office. "Hello, Mr. Shanzu. There is someone called Jack here who claims that he's here to visit the management office." The guard spoke humbly. "Jack? Never heard of him. What car is he driving?" Shanzu asked. "Well, it should be a Lamborghini," the guard replied. The moment that Shanzu heard that Jack was here in a Lamborghini, he was excited. He immediately interrupted the guard. "I'll be there in a minute. Tell him that I'll be receiving him personally." Immediately after saying that, he hung up and ended the call before he rushed out of the office. Seeing the excited Shanzu, the people in the management office were surprised to see him rushing out. They hadn't expected that they would see him this excited. Now, they were curious about what had made him this agitated. But they dared not to ask him this question as they knew how he usually behaved. He would definitely scold them and may end up reducing their salary. Shanzu was a person with a slim stature. He had a small mustache and, the way that his eyes were, could already give someone a picture of a shrewd person. As he rushed out of the residence management office, he thought, "This is yet another opportunity. I just hope that this guy is rich. Otherwise, how am I going to benefit? Whatever, even if he's not that rich, I can simply get benefits from him as long as he buys a villa here." The guard didn't know what was up with Shanzu and what had made him so agitated. All the same, he couldn't help but change the way that he was looking at Jack. It seemed that Shanzu knew them, and if that was so, they must be influential. He thought that it was good that he hadn't treated them coldly just because they had a car that was worth a few $100,000. He smiled at Jack and said, "The assistant manager has said that he's going to receive you personally within a minute." Jack nodded before deciding to wait. Although he had seen the images of this Serenity residential area, he had yet to enter. Neither had Denali been here as she was busy with the other 2 companies, more so Brightway Medical Research Center. About a minute later, Jack saw a thin man in a suit rushing out from the residential area. The man looked around as if he was looking for something, and after looking for a while, he walked towards the guard and asked coldly, "Has the person left already?" The 3 of them were completely unsure on how to react on this person's question. Jack could already tell that this guy was Shanzu as he had already seen his image when he read his information back in Venture City. Mr. Shanzu." Even before the guard could complete whatever he was saying, Shanzu interrupted again. "I told you to tell him that I would be here in a minute. But I have arrived in about 50 seconds, but he has already left? You are incompetent in your work. Your salary this month will be reduced by." Shanzu spoke angrily. He had been looking forward to getting to meet a rich man so that he could benefit from it. In the end, he found that there was no rich man at all. He had already left. He was so angry that he wanted to strangle this guard. "Actually, Mr. Shanzu," the guard wanted to say that the person hadn't left and was just in the car beside him. But He was interrupted by the angry Shanzu. What? You want to say that it wasn't your fault? Okay then. Since it wasn't your fault, it was my fault. To relieve you from the burden of taking responsibility, you'll only receive half of your salary this month. The guard couldn't help but get angry at this guy. What had he done in that his salary had already been slashed by a half? Had it not been for the fact that he was in need of the job, he would definitely have quit at this moment and beat up this sharp-mouthed guy. At this moment, Shanzu seemed to notice that the car that Jack was in wasn't leaving. He frowned and looked at the guard before he began reprimanding again. What are you doing here? Can't you see that someone is blocking the entrance of the residential area? Since you're not serious with your duty, you won't receive any bonus this month. Before the guard could say another word, Shanzu pointed at the car and said, Chase this car away from here. How can such a crappy car stop in front of the gates of the residential area? The guard became flustered. In just a single minute, his salary had been deducted by half, and all the bonus that he was supposed to receive this month had all been canceled. How could he not be angry? But, swallowing his anger, he looked at Jack and said, I'm sorry, Mr. Jack, but it seems that you'll have to leave. Jack was already fuming at this moment. Although he had found that this guy was using the villas to his advantage, he hadn't expected that his character was this way. No wonder only a few villas had been sold till now. The way that this guy was speaking and acting, simply deducting the employee's salary and anything that made him unhappy, was something that Jack didn't like at all. This guy called Shanzu was definitely unfit for the position that he was holding. He was now wondering who was the one that had given him this post. Furthermore, where the heck was Moses? He was the manager here, but Jack couldn't see anything that he was doing. It was like he wasn't in control at all. Although according to his file he was an honest man, he was incompetent in Jack's eyes. To let an assistant manager take over and bully the employees, chase away potential clients and so on. This was definitely something that the manager should have heard about, no matter what. Jack stepped out of the car and said coldly, I'm the one that asked him to make the call. Shanzu was stunned for a moment. He gazed at Jack up and down before looking at the car that he had just alighted from. He looked at the guard and pointed at Jack before shouting, What the F***CK is this? You told me that there was someone with a Lamborghini here. Where is it? Was this the guy driving a Lamborghini? Mr. Shanzu, he's driving a Lamborghini Urus. The guard pointed at the logo on the car. Shanzu looked at it. He was silent for a moment before he began retorting again. You call this a Lamborghini? This is an Urus, not a Lamborghini. The Lamborghini that I know is a Lamborghini Veneno. It wasn't just the angry Jack, but even the guard and Denali were stunned. Wasn't this car made by Lamborghini? How was it not a Lamborghini? Just because it wasn't worth $1 million? Hey, get the hell out of here now. You are fired. Shanzu pointed at the guard. Then, he turned at Jack and pointed at him as he said, As for you, better get lost from here before I call the police that you are disturbing Boosie. Art. He wasn't able to finish his words before he screamed in pain. At this moment, Denali had already gotten out of the car and held the hand whose finger was pointing at Jack and twisted it. You think that you can shout at my boss? Do you think that you're qualified to do that? Denali asked coldly. She had already been angry the first time that Shanzu pointed fingers at Jack. So, she couldn't stand it the time that he tried doing that the second time. The guard looked from the side. He was completely surprised at the moment as he stared at Denali, who was now standing behind Jack. He had simply seen a shadow rushing out of the car before Shanzu began screaming in pain as he fell on the ground, holding his right hand. He was now wondering whether or not to go ahead and protect Shanzu from further abuse. But when he thought about how he had suffered as well as how he couldn't even follow Denali's moves, he decided against it. As for how he was going to get himself away from getting involved was simple. I have already been fired. I don't think that I have any responsibility here. Had it been another time, he wouldn't be proud about that. But now that things were like this, he could proudly say that he had been fired. Shanzu screamed in pain as 3 people watched him, none of them having the intention of stepping forward to help him relieve the pain. It was only after about 5 minutes of screaming that Shanzu came back to his senses. He gritted his teeth as he tried to endure the pain that he was experiencing at the moment. Currently, his right hand's wrist had been dislocated. So, he could only hold his right wrist using his left hand. As his mind began thinking clearly, he turned his gaze towards the guard and shouted at him. What the F***CK are still standing there for? Don't you see that someone has attacked your employer? It's your duty to protect me from this kind of situation. Yet, you're still standing there, not doing a thing. Shanzu was so furious at this time in that, as he endured the pain, he shouted more loudly than he had done the previous times. After shouting at the guard while expecting him to take action, Shanzu looked at Denali. He was at first dazed before he suddenly remembered that it was her who had just dislocated his wrist. As a result, he pointed his finger, only to drop it in fear of having his other arm dislocated. But all the same, he still shouted, "You think that you can be arrogant here? I think you don't know where you are at this moment. Let me tell you this, all of you, the two of you. I'm going to make sure that you only leave here after you have several of your limbs broken." As Shanzu shouted at the two, he realized that something wasn't right. He glanced behind him only to see that the guard hadn't made a move yet. In fact, he seemed to be changing his clothes. What the hell? I just told you to take action and beat the two of them up. What are you still doing there? Shanzu shouted angrily. The guard turned to look at Shanzu with a smile on his face and said, "Shanzu, you should know what I'm doing. I'm obviously changing my clothes. You have already fired me. So, I'm no longer your employee. What's more, I don't think that I have the responsibility of defending a stranger who goes around looking for trouble, right?" As the guard said these words, he thought to himself, what a joke. Me? Fight that lady? I must be out of my mind if I dare to do that. Maybe if it was for my family, I will. But fighting for a piece of trash like you, better luck next time. Who are you calling by his first name? And what do you mean that you're no longer an employee here? You haven't gone through the procedures yet. So, you're still an employee here. Shanzu retorted. Okay then, I quit. The guard shrugged his shoulders and responded as he changed his shirt. Then, he prepared himself to leave this place, having no intention of meddling with the issue. Even if you quit, you have yet to be released by the management. So, the contract that you signed is still valid. Shanzu couldn't accept this. Then, I'll just break the contract and pay the remuneration. The guard was nonchalant at this moment. His contract was going to expire the following month. He was previously planning to renew it, but Shanzu hadn't given him a chance to do that yet. As such, he was now happy that he hadn't renewed the contract yet. Additionally, since it was just a few days before the contract expired, the amount that he was supposed to pay was just a small one. Although he would suffer some losses, it was better than being in this place that was a paradise with a devil. Shanzu was just about to say another word when he heard a snort coming from behind him. When he turned around, he saw that Jack was looking at him with a dark expression on his face. Shanzu, you're the assistant manager here, just below Moses. I do wonder if this is the attitude that an assistant manager is supposed to have when facing possible clients. Jack said. His voice was cold at this moment. Shanzu frowned. He wondered how Jack knew about Moses. That guy, although he was the manager, he had been away for a period of time now. So, Shanzu had been using this opportunity to benefit himself as much as he could. He knew that once Moses came back, he would surely have no chance again. After all, Moses was an upright and honest man. But there was still something that he couldn't accept. That was, a nobody trying to lecture him on how he had to behave. So, he retorted, who the F***CK do you think you are, brat? Do you think you have the qualifications to speak to me in such a manner? Jack didn't respond. Instead, he turned to Denali and said, call Moses for me. Shanzu was stunned by Jack's words. Then, he began laughing wildly, only to stop due to the pain that came from shaking of his shoulders from laughing. But that didn't stop him from snickering. He gazed at Jack and said, call Moses? Do you think you have the qualifications? If you are not qualified to deal with me, how can you deal with him? Let me see how you're going to do it. And with that, he tried to fold his arms in front of his chest, only to stop as he grunted in pain. As he thought of the pain that he was going through, he looked at Denali with eyes full of resentment. Denali, of course, ignored him and made a call. As Jack's PA, she had all the contact information of the top employees saved in her contact list. As for the other employees, their details were all saved in her laptop. All the same, she could access the details in her laptop from her phone through her email. After making a call, she handed the phone to Jack. Holding the phone close to his ear, Jack waited for a moment before Moses received the call. "Hello, who's this?" Moses asked with a hoarse voice. Since the call was made with Denali's phone, he didn't know that it was Jack who was contacting him. "I'm Jack. I would like to ask where you are at the moment," Jack asked gloomily. From the hoarse voice, he could tell that this guy seemed to be fatigued or something. Moses hadn't expected that Jack would ask him that question. "All the same," he replied, "I'm currently in the Eastern Province. I'm having some problems here." "What kind of problems are those?" Jack questioned. "Well, my mother is sick. So, she's currently admitted in the hospital and I'm accompanying her," Moses replied. Jack could clearly feel the sadness in his voice. But that had to be put aside for now. "I'm sorry about that. But I would like to ask you about the residential area. How is it being managed now that you are away?" "Shanzu, the assistant manager, is there. According to the reports that he has been sending me, everything should be going on okay. Or is there a problem there?" Moses asked nervously. "There's a big problem here. I got here only for this Shanzu to chase me away. Furthermore, he seems to be so domineering and can deduct the employees' salaries at will. Then, there's a fact that he can simply fire employees according to his mood. As for his attitude, I wonder how he always faces potential clients here," Jack explained. Since Moses was away for a reason like that, although he had yet to confirm, Jack decided to go easy on him. Before Moses could say a word, Jack asked, "Don't you have another person that you can confirm with if things are okay here?" Moses was now not sure how to reply to this. How could he do that? He had clearly remembered to inform Shanzu that the residential area had been acquired by a person called Jackson Alfonso. But now, this guy had wanted to chase Jack away? He began sweating, wondering what was going to happen next now that Jack seemed to be angry. But he too was angry at that moment because Shanzu was definitely trying to cause him problems. "Can I speak to him?" Moses asked nervously. Jack didn't say a word and handed the phone to the smug Shanzu, who was watching him as if he was enjoying a show. Although he thought that Jack was simply playing around, he still decided to play along. "Hello," he said amusedly. "Hello, your King head Shanzu. If you want to die, why the heck are you pulling me down with you? You am King idiot. You dare to ask the owner of the residential area that you're helping him in management to P** is off?" For the first time in his life, Moses hurled a mountain of profanities with no end. He really wanted to swallow this idiot. He had expected that this guy was competent enough because according to the observation that he had made previously when he was still in Kartu City, he was a capable person. Shanzu was petrified the moment that he heard Moses's angry voice. He didn't know what to say or do at that moment. He had always been sending fake reports to Moses all this time, while trying to benefit as much as he could from the residential area. But now, he could only look at Jack in stupor, completely petrified. Thinking about how he had just scolded his boss, the pain from having his arm dislocated disappeared, or he completely ignored it. He dropped the phone onto the ground before he followed. Now, he knew that there was no way that he was going to maintain his position anymore. He had just behaved atrociously in front of his boss. Even he himself didn't believe that he would spare a subordinate that dared to scold him. Jack didn't say a word as he watched Shanzu, who was now sprawled on the ground, with his eyes being lifeless. Denali picked up the phone from the ground and handed it back to Jack. Being that Moses had yet to hang up, he stated, "Although this is not completely your fault, it definitely has something to do with you not being keen and completely trusting others easily. So, there will be changes that are going to be made. As for whether you will still remain as the manager or you will be demoted, that will depend with the situation," Jack stated. Moses sighed in relief when he heard Jack's words. He knew that Jack had been merciful to him. Had this been another person, he would have been fired immediately. But Jack had allowed him to continue working for him. Although he might be demoted, that didn't matter to him. That was a small punishment that he could take as compared to the mistake that he had made. "Thank you, boss. I'll make sure to get back as soon as possible," Moses said. "Just take your time," Jack responded before hanging up. "Thank you, boss. I'll make sure to get back as soon as possible." Moses said. Just take your time. Jack responded before hanging up. He then turned his gaze to Shanzu. He looked at him for a moment before shaking his head. He then said to Denali, look into all the things that he has been doing in the absence of Moses. If there's anything that requires the law, submit it to the police and let them come and pick him up. Yes, boss. Denali replied as she took the phone from Jack's hand. On the other hand, the guard was completely stupefied about the situation. He wondered what was going on. Wasn't Shanzu pompous a moment ago? What happened? What was he told for him to end up in such an embarrassing state? Anyway, it's good that he's found his match. He was just about to head to the management office to resign when he was stopped by Jack's voice. There's no need for you to resign at all. He's no longer the assistant manager here. So, he has no more authority. What about a compensation of double salary for this month, for the abuse that you have been through? Jack asked. The guard was frozen on the spot. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. Had Shanzu been removed from his position? This was good. And what was even better was the fact that he was being offered the compensation by having his salary doubled. Who was this person that could actually raise his salary just by saying it? But, looking at the listless Shanzu, he was forced to believe what Jack had said. In the end, he accepted. It was better to have his salary doubled, rather than to pay for the termination fee of the contract that was still effective until a few days later. After settling things at the entrance, the guard opened the gate and let Jack and Denali to drive into the residence. Since he had yet to be here, Jack observed the surroundings carefully. He looked at the layout of the villas here. He could see that each villa had its own courtyard. Furthermore, there was an area that was like a garden. There were several benches there. At the side, there was a playground for children and so on. In other words, the Serenity residential area was a good place for both the people with or without children. For those that didn't like noise, they wouldn't be affected as the playground was a good distance from the villas. So, the children could play without restraint or fear that they would disturb someone's rest or work. The management office wasn't far from the gate, and from the moment that Jack entered, he had used his high level of vision to look at these things. In fact, he had only seen 2 villas at the moment, and he was impressed, because the level of these villas was top-notch. Even his prince and princess palace couldn't compare. When he arrived in front of the management building, he found that all the staff members were lining up, waiting for his arrival. So, the moment that he got there, they both greeted him in unison. Greetings, boss. The ladies were looking at his handsome face with stars shining in them. But, the moment that they saw Denali, they were forced to give up on any thoughts that they were having about the young, rich, and handsome boss of theirs. As for the men, they were both amazed and envious of Jack. Not only was he rich at such a young age, but he also had the company of a very beautiful lady. As men, it was normal that they too had some wishes along this line. But wishes and dreams were different from the harsh reality. Now, they could only watch. As for Denali, with Jack by her side added to her cold demeanor, none of them dared to have any thoughts or designs on her. If she could accompany Jack, she was definitely someone that they could only see but not touch. From this kind of reception, Jack could tell that Moses must have informed them that he was here. So, they came out to receive him. Although he wasn't used to the grand welcome, he still nodded and said, "No need to be so polite. You can just continue with what you were doing. I'm here to look around." The staff members dispersed one after the other as they returned to their posts. But a lady remained behind. Jack looked at her with raised brows, wondering if there was something that she had to say. "Boss, since you are here for a tour, I would like to take you around." The lady stated her reason for staying behind. Jack looked at her keenly. She was wearing a white blouse and a red skirt that reached below her knees. As for her feet, she was wearing ordinary flat-based black lady's shoes. She seemed to be in her late 20s, and from her temperament and expression as she looked at him, Jack could tell that she was someone that was serious about her work. In response, he nodded and said, "Please, lead the way." The lady nodded and led the way after picking up the keys of the villas that had yet to be sold. Jack and Denali followed behind her. The lady, whose name was Ruth, took them on a tour. And since the place was big, they used one of the cars that was used to take those that had the interest in buying the villas around. Since Jack was the boss here, he could go to any villa that hadn't been bought. But since he didn't want to spend so much time here, he didn't enter any of them. There were a total of 30 villas here, with the cheapest worth $20 million. The total worth of the villas here was estimated to be at least $3.8 billion. Currently, there were only 6 villas that had been sold, all of them being the cheapest. As for the others, most people shied away when they heard the price of the villas here. But Jack could understand why the price was high. The villas were not only big, but the environment was also good. The location of the villas here was far from the busy streets and noise of the city. Additionally, the residential area was in the capital city, Khartoum, where space to build such luxurious villas with their own courtyard was limited. So, it was normal for the price to be high. Otherwise, how was the developer going to earn a profit considering the costs that were involved in the construction? The deeper they headed, the more luxurious and bigger the mansions got. And so, was the price of the villas here. When they got to the deepest part of the residential area, Jack saw the masterpiece of the residential area. This villa was completely different from the others. It was located on an elevated place, and around the lower ground, he could see that there was a stream that passed here. The stream had clear water, obvious that it was free from pollution, even though this was actually a city. The environment here was just like the one that could be found in the Prince and Princess Palace. But here, things were cheerful and lively as there were a few birds that had their nests on trees that were around the villa. Jack was mesmerized by this place. But although he really wanted to stay here, he definitely didn't want to waste the money that he had paid for his stay in the hotel. So, he came to a decision. He would definitely live here if there would be nobody who would have bought it after a month from now. He was curious about the interior of the villa. So, they entered it. Jack looked at the luxurious decorations. Furthermore, the level of technology here was also advanced as it had an automatic recognition of the owner, as long as his details were registered into the system. There were a few sound control systems present as well, and although Jack had thought that the garage that the Prince and Princess Palace had was high level, compared to this level of technology, Jack thought that the garage couldn't compare. This villa had several facilities just like the Prince and Princess Palace. Furthermore, it had its own helipad on the roof. As for the swimming pool, there was one that was located on the second floor. As to how that was possible, he himself wasn't sure about it because no matter how he tried looking at it, the depth of the pool was just like normal pools. But downstairs, the ceiling was just normal. After the tour ended, Jack was satisfied with this villa that was worth about $200 million. It wasn't just the villa that made the price, but the environment also added to the price. After leaving Serenity residential area, Jack and Denali went back to the Cardinal Supreme Hotel. While Jack was in Khartoum City, a white Maserati arrived in front of the gates of the Prince and Princess Palace. In the white Maserati, there were 2 young and beautiful ladies. "Yes, who are you here to see?" Bob asked. "I'm here to see Celine. She should have informed you about my arrival. I'm Wendy," Wendy said with a smile. "Oh, indeed. I was informed about your arrival. Please come in. She's waiting for you." Bob nodded to the guards to open the gate and allow Wendy inside. When Wendy and Angie saw all the cars that were in the garage or were parked outside, they were stunned. They wondered if Celine had come here to do car business or what. But looking at the logo, Wendy's heart skipped a beat as she looked at the name there. She wondered, Jackson Enterprise, is he the one? It ain't possible, right? Jackson Enterprise, is he the one? It ain't possible, right? As she thought of this, she alighted from the car after parking it. Then, she looked at the cars carefully. She could swear that she had never heard of the enterprise called Jackson Enterprise. This was her first time that she was hearing it since the last times that she had visited the city. In other words, this enterprise had to be a new one. After all, it had only been about 5 months since the last time that she was here in Inchoate City. But what made her mind fill up with questions was the fact that there were cars for the enterprise filling the garage. So, she had to park her car outside, next to the ones that were parked outside. Out of curiosity, she approached the garage. What she saw shocked her greatly. Inside, other than the Bentegas, there were 2 other cars. A Bentley Continental GT, that was something that didn't surprise her that much. What had greatly shocked her was the fact that there was actually a Bugatti Veyron inside here. This was a limited edition that they were talking about. Although one might have money to buy it, it wasn't enough. One had to have enough connections to get these types of limited edition cars. As she was shocked, she didn't notice Angie calling her. Seeing that she was not reacting, Angie came and shook Wendy out of her stupor. "What are you looking at that made you ignore?" Angie wasn't able to finish her words as she was stunned by the appearance of the Bugatti Veyron in the garage. She could tell that this was a customized version of the Bugatti Veyron. In other words, the price of this Bugatti had to be higher than the ones that were not customized. "Is this Celine's place really?" Doubtfully, Angie asked. She couldn't believe that Celine could actually have this car. Wendy and Celine's family backgrounds were similar. So, since she was sure that Wendy didn't have the connections to get it, there was no way that Celine could get it. "I'm not sure about that either. Or, could we have come to a wrong place?" Wendy questioned, not sure at all if this was really where Celine lived. "If it was the wrong place, the guards wouldn't have let us in here." Angie shook her head. She too was confused. According to what they knew, Celine came to Inchoate City about 2 weeks ago. So, how could it be possible that she had already bought so many cars? Furthermore, the names of the enterprise didn't match the one that Celine had told them that she was coming to start. Clearly, these cars were for the grocery department, words clearly written below the logo. Angie approached the Bugatti Veyron and looked at it closely. Then, she noted that there was a Jack added above the plate number. Connecting it to the Jackson Enterprise that was added to the Bentegas, she could already guess it. "I think that this Bugatti Veyron belongs to a person called Jackson. Do you think Celine has gotten a boyfriend?" Angie asked with a smile. "Jackson? I've never heard of this person in the capital. It surprises me that someone in such a small city can actually afford a Bugatti Veyron. As for Celine getting a boyfriend," Wendy wasn't able to finish her words before she was interrupted. "So here you are. I was wondering where you had run off to. Turns out that you were here appreciating the cars," Celine said with a smile as she walked into the garage. Angie and Wendy turned towards her. Celine walked to them, and they hugged each other. The three of them were good friends. Although Wendy knew Angie first, they had met with Celine when they got to high school. And from that moment, their friendship had developed to this point. Now, they could share most of their secrets with each other, and they treated each other as sisters. "What were you saying about getting a boyfriend? Who is it that has gotten a boyfriend and I don't know about it?" Celine asked curiously. "Well, I was wondering if you had gotten a boyfriend. After all, we can see that," Wendy said as she pointed at the Jack just right above the plate number and the one on the logo, Jackson Enterprise. Celine was at first confused, but when she caught the meaning behind what Wendy was implying, she blushed for a moment as she hastily replied, What nonsense are you talking about? That's not my boyfriend. He's just a friend that I made when I came here." Seeing Celine blushing, both Angie and Wendy stared at her with weird gazes. This was actually one of the rare moments that they had seen Celine blushing. She was always a person with a strong mentality. So, it was difficult for her to be seen like this. Additionally, this was actually the first time that they had seen her blushing like this. What they didn't know was that, at the mention of Jack, Celine could remember the contacts that they had during the dance and during the time that they had been kidnapped. Since at that time that Jack had embraced her, there was nobody that knew her. She didn't feel anything weird about it. But in front of her friends, she was shy as she thought of that scene. Look at her, blushing, and she's saying that she doesn't have a boyfriend. Humph, what's more, she's clearly living with him, and she's saying that they only met recently. How can that be? Angie snorted as she gazed at Celine sharply. At this moment, she realized that both of her friends had fallen for someone, and they were really into it. Wendy was already engaged to him, while on the other hand, Celine had already begun living with him. This made her jealous at how lucky the two were to fall in love. But when she thought about Jack, who had still gotten a woman despite having a fiancé, she just thought that maybe boys were just scumbags. What nonsense are you saying? We live in the same compound, but in different mansions, Celine retorted. But her face reddened further as she thought of Jack's body. That was the time that she had gone to pay him a visit and found that he was resting in the pool. She was completely mesmerized by that figure of his, those well-sculpted muscles that were reflecting sunlight as they were wet. At that time, only after a minute did she come back to her senses and rushed away. And since then, she dared not to step in the Prince Palace till Jack left. See, She's denying it, but the body is telling the truth. Look at that red face of hers. Angie snorted again. Looking at the blushing Celine, Wendy couldn't help but think of Jack. She could remember the time that she had fallen into his embrace when he saved her a year ago. That was the time that she would definitely not forget about. After all, it was a special moment, a time where she was saved from the clutches of death and found her way to what was called love. As she thought of that scene, Wendy blushed as well. And upon seeing the two blushing girls, Angie was completely jealous. So, she could only snort and walk out while saying, "Love-struck fools." Jack stayed in the capital for 3 days. During these 3 days, he had visited Good Vision Security Limited, as well as Hope Hospital and Andis Corporation. It seemed that the system wanted him to develop in the capital as the businesses that he was receiving were all having their headquarters in the capital. But he didn't think that it was something bad, considering that it would be better if he developed in the capital first before spreading to the other cities with Kartu City as the center. Although his initial plan was to develop in a small city first before going to a big city, that was when he didn't have the system. But now that he had the system that was rewarding him with companies and shares, Jack thought that it wouldn't be a bad idea if he followed what the system was implying. The production of the pills was still in progress. According to the group that was in charge of the production, they had claimed that the first batch of pills would definitely be ready by next week. He wasn't sure about the success rate of the production of the pills, but all the same, he was really looking forward to it. Although he had the intention of using the pills to boost the market value of Brightway Medical Research Center, he decided against it after thinking it through. If he released the pills into the market, even if the price was sky-high, he was sure that there were several rich men that could get them. If they got them and supplied them to his future enemies, wouldn't he have shot himself on the foot? So, he decided that the pills would only be used by those that had joined the private team. As for how to boost the market value of the research center, he would just inject money that could aid in research. Once a research was successful, he was sure that the market value would rise. But at the same time, he was hoping that the first-time reward would be another pill recipe. In that way, he would definitely be able to have something that can raise the market value of the institution. Since the research center was busy with the production of the pills as well as researching other things, Jack had decided to begin the merging of Amber Securities, Safety Enforcers, and Good Vision Security Limited. The process had already begun, but it would take some time to be completed. The good thing was that Ayush had also come to the capital and was helping Denali with the process. Currently, he was preparing himself to go back to Inchoate City. He had already promised Wendy that he would join them this week, and he was going to keep the promise. So, he was going to leave tonight. Although the week was already ending, he thought that it wouldn't be late considering that there was nothing important that they were going to do. They were going to relax. So, he thought that it wouldn't hurt to be late for a few days, right? First, he decided to check his current balance. Flyers Bank saving account balance is $5,839,953,321. He had gotten money from the grocery stores recently, and this was over $150 million. But there were other expenditures that required money to be spent. So, his account could be said to have gained about $100 million. Since he was only having the money that came from the grocery stores being multiplied, even if there was money that came from the other companies that he had a share in or were under him, they were not multiplied. The reason behind this being that they had a different timeline for the multiplication. For instance, the one from Good Vision Security Limited and Brightway Medical Research Center, the income would be multiplied monthly. As for something like the Andis Corporation, the multiplier would only be applied once a year when he received the dividends. The Serenity residential area, on the other hand, simply depended on the sales. Once he sold a villa there, the income would be multiplied. What Jack was really looking forward to the most was the income that came from selling the villas. Although they couldn't be sold all at once, at least he was sure that the income would be big once the sales were made. Currently, the cheapest that had yet to be sold was the one that was worth $90 million. Once this villa was sold, he would definitely have gotten $9 billion. Just from this, he would be a big step towards one of the conditions for upgrading the system. The system needed him to have a balance of $50 billion in his account. On the other hand, he was supposed to have 5 companies that were worth $50 billion each. Furthermore, they were supposed to have defeated one competitor in the industry and make the company's monopolies in the industry. Thinking of this condition now, he thought that this system was shrewd. It seemed that he had to defeat more than a single competitor. After all, if he had to make the company's monopolies, how could there be competitors? After a moment, he came to another decision. That was to look for 5 industries that had the least competition. There, he would have his companies rise to be evaluated to a worth of $50 billion and, at the same time, crush the non-existent competition. Jack decided to call Wendy to inform her that he would be coming back the following day. He had gotten her contact before he left Venture City for Inchoate City. She could then arrange on where they were going to once he arrived. Since he would be leaving on that very night, he would be there by morning. So, he was sure that they could go out the following day itself. "Hello, Jack. How are you doing?" Wendy's excited voice drifted to his ears. Jack wasn't sure what was making this girl so happy. But all the same, he greeted back. Then, he went straight to the point. "I'll be back by tomorrow. So, we can leave at 9 in the morning, depending on what you were planning." Wendy had been waiting to hear these words all this while. So, the moment that she heard Jack say them, she was completely excited about it. After all, other than missing Jack, the other young masters and ladies that were part of the group were already getting impatient. Seeing that Jack was yet to come, she had told them to simply go and do their thing and they would join them later. Now that Jack was coming, at least she wouldn't be disturbed by the posts that her friends were showing off when they visited other places. "Okay then, I will make the arrangements right now," Wendy said enthusiastically. After that, she chatted with him for a few minutes before hanging up. After ending the call with Wendy, Jack called Celine. "Hello, you busy now?" "No, I just got out of the bathroom," Celine replied. "Oh, I was saying that I will be back tomorrow," Jack said while scratching his head a little awkwardly. "Tomorrow? Okay then. Where should I wait for you?" Celine nodded and asked. "On the roof of the garage. I'll be landing there. But I'm sure that you will be asleep at that time." Jack smiled as he replied. "Not really. Since you are coming back, I will obviously wait for you. Furthermore, I'm done with the hardest parts of the company. So, I can now relax." Celine refuted. "You know, you shouldn't strain yourself. You have to take care of your health," Jack reminded her. Celine, on the other side, sat on the bed with only a towel covering her body. Her long legs were exposed as well as her shoulders and arms. There were drops of water glistening on her skin under the illumination of the light in the room. Her hair was damp, as well as she had hurriedly gotten out of the bathroom as soon as she noticed that it was Jack's call. She smiled sweetly when she saw how concerned he was about her. "Worry not. Currently, the stage that required me to strain myself has already gone by. And now, Faith is the one that is dealing with the other things. Moreover, I'm going out to relax with my friends in a few days' time. Will you accompany me?" Celine asked expectantly. Jack wasn't prepared to have her asking him to accompany her. He had just told Wendy that he would be free the following day. And since they were going to go to different cities, it was obvious that it wouldn't be something that would take a single day. It had to be at least 2 days. Thinking of this, he asked, "Can you give me the exact day that you will be going out so that I can make the arrangements?" Let me ask. She hasn't told me when we're leaving, but I'll make sure to ask her," Celine replied. "Okay then, take your time to relax even before the vacation that you're going in a few days' time," Jack reminded. "Okay then, I'll be waiting for you. Just tell me the time that you will be landing," Celine said. "Got it. Good night," Jack said before hanging up. Jack was debating on what to do next. After thinking things through, he decided that since he had already promised Wendy, he would go out with her and her friends first. Then, just in case Celine was going to go out after 2 days, he would leave the group to go and accompany her. After all, he was more familiar with Celine than he was with Wendy. What Jack didn't know was that he was bound to have a headache soon. In Inchoate City, Prince and Princess Palace. Wendy excitedly hugged the phone after ending the call with Jack. She was in the room that Celine had given her to stay in the Princess Mansion. At this time, Angie walked in. Looking at the blushing and excited Wendy, she was curious what had made her be like this. Although the blush could state that this had something to do with a man, it was not an absolute. "What made you this excited? From your blushing face, could it be that your fiancé has told you something sweet?" she asked as she sat on the bed, next to Wendy, who was lying on the bed, facing the ceiling. Angie's voice brought Wendy back to reality. She looked at her and said, "You know what? Jack just called and told me that he would be coming tomorrow. Haven't you been impatient about going out? We will be leaving tomorrow." Angie was at first expectant that there was something good that had happened. In the end, it turned out that it was just Jack coming back. He had been keeping the two of them waiting for a period of time now. So, for him to be coming back, although it was relieving that they wouldn't have to wait any longer, at least, she thought that it was nothing to be this excited about. But, on second thought, looking at the excited Wendy, Angie thought that maybe this was something that only those in love could feel excited about. But all the same, she had decided in her heart that she was going to make sure that Jack took a good care of her sister. Otherwise, she would definitely make him pay for it dearly. She had already gotten information about Jack from Wendy. So, she thought that a mere Alfonso family wouldn't stop her from making Jack pay if he did anything that made her sister cry. It is good that he's coming back. I was getting impatient after all. Had he decided not to come back till this day, I would have surely gone to bring him here. Angie responded after a period of silence. Wendy was just about to say something when the door was opened and Celine walked in. From her face, the duo could immediately tell that she was excited. Angie couldn't help but grumble in her heart, wondering what was up with these girls. They were completely smitten in that they were behaving like fools. "Wendy, when are we going for the vacation?" Celine asked as soon as she got in. "Tomorrow," Wendy replied confusedly. But thinking that maybe it was just Celine getting impatient like Angie, she still replied, "Got it." Celine replied before she began typing on her phone. Curious, Angie asked, "Who are you texting?" While typing, Celine replied, "The owner of this place is coming back. I wanted him to come with us. You don't mind, right?" Wendy and Angie shook their heads. They were curious about this man that had made their Celine this way. "When will he come back?" Angie asked again. "Tomorrow," Celine replied before leaving. Wendy was still excited about Jack coming the following day that she didn't even think much about Celine's reply. On the other hand, Angie couldn't help but frown. She wondered to herself, what a one-of-a-kind coincidence. The two guys are coming on the same day? Well, good for me. I can still pay attention to the one on Celine's part. I want to see who he is. As for that Jack, I would make sure to be strict on him, Angie thought. But at the same time, there was a nagging feeling, but she wasn't sure what it was. She wasn't sure if it was good or bad. So, after a while of thinking about this matter, she forgot about it and decided to chat with Wendy to relieve her boredom. "Celine, frowny face, we will be heading out tomorrow." Jack received Celine's reply after about 5 minutes from the time that he had ended the call. The answer made him stressed out a little. He wondered what he was supposed to do. After all, the two ladies expected his company on the same day. After a long time of thinking, he decided to ask something else. He had to know the details so that he could make proper plans on how to handle things here. "Jack, how long would your vacation last?" Celine, "About a week." Jack thought things through and decided that he was going to fulfill his promise by being with Wendy for 2 days first. Since he didn't want her to continue the issue about them being engaged, he would have to keep a distance. But keeping a distance didn't mean that he would be an enemy. At least, he had now learned a lesson that he would have to think twice before accepting such an invitation from her. On the other hand, he was going to accompany Celine for 5 days. Although this could be said to be favoritism, Jack would definitely accept it no matter what others said. According to what he knew, he was more comfortable in Celine's presence than in Wendy's. Furthermore, he didn't want to have so many interactions with Wendy. Perhaps this would make her give up on him. Additionally, he really wanted to spend time with Celine. Had she not invited him, he would have invited her once she was done with the duties back at the Eminent Beauty. "Jack, I think I will accompany you from the 3rd day of your vacation. Just tell me your location at that time, and I will come." Of course, Celine wasn't pleased with the reply that she had received. But at least, although he had only accepted to accompany her from the 3rd day, it was still good that he accepted. Furthermore, he would accompany her for 5 days. Anyway, once she was offered one, she would think that 2 would have been better. And if she was offered 2 first, she would definitely claim that 5 would have been better. That was a human's nature. As long as it was something that they liked or loved, they would definitely yearn for more. That was just the case with Celine at the moment. Had she been offered company for 2 days, she would definitely think that it was too little and request for 5 if possible. Although she would have liked to have Jack's company during the whole vacation, she didn't want to force him to do that. So, she replied. Celine frowny face. Okay then. Just tell me when you land. I'll be sure to wait for your arrival. One more thing, you can give me the estimate time that you will arrive. Jack, it should be around 6 in the morning. Celine, got it. Jack wasted no time and contacted Gabriel to inform him that he was ready. Although he had already told him the previous day that they would be leaving tonight, he still thought that it would be good if he could give him the reminder. After an early dinner at 6, Denali drove Jack to the airport. The earlier he left, the earlier he would arrive at his destination. Although he was strong and his vitality was high due to the professional combatant ability, that didn't mean that he would just tire himself out unreasonably. When they got to the airport, it was already close to 8. According to the schedule that Gabriel had planned, they would be departing at 8 p.m. Jack bid Denali goodbye before getting into the jet. After everything was done, at 8 o'clock, the plane took off. 5 hours later, Jack arrived at the airport in Venture City. Gabriel and Jack left the handling of the plane to the management staff of the airport and decided to take a rest first. After about 2 hours of rest, they got into the Eurocopter and flew towards Inchoate City. And after 4 hours, they were there. When they arrived in Inchoate City, the sun had yet to rise. Currently, it was already 6:15 in the morning. He had already informed Celine that he would arrive around this hour. So, he was sure that she was waiting for him if there were no accidents. And he was looking forward to meeting her again. Just a few days being away, but he had just missed her greatly. Even he himself wasn't sure why he missed her that much. Although they had been chatting every night since he left, it was different when meeting and seeing each other. The Eurocopter flew and steadily landed on the helipad on top of the garage of the Prince and Princess Palace. Jack had already informed Celine that he was here through TM, text me. So, the moment that the plane landed, Celine appeared in his vision. Jack, you're here. Celine called out excitedly as she smiled at him. Her charming smile really entranced him. Unconsciously, he smiled back. Jack was just about to respond when he noticed something that made him surprised. Just behind Celine, there were 2 girls that he was familiar with, Wendy and Angie. Seeing Jack's gaze was on the figures behind her, although Celine was dissatisfied, she thought that he was surprised that there was someone else that he didn't know on his property. So, she decided to introduce the 2 sides. But upon seeing that the 2 sides were looking at each other in a strange manner, she couldn't help but ask, "You guys know each other? You guys know each other?" Celine wasn't the only one that asked that question, as both Jack and the 2 girls asked the same question at the same time as her. Jack directed the question at Celine, Celine to the 2 girls, and the 2 girls to Jack. It was like a triangle. Anyway, after this question, there was silence as none of the 4 knew what to say for a moment. Gabriel, who had just alighted, had happened to find a scene where 4 people asked the same question at the same time. He could only say that he was lucky that he could be there at such a rare moment. Too bad, he hadn't recorded the scene. But, looking at the scene, he wondered what kind of game was being played here. Could it be the scene where you are dating 2 girls at the same time, but you don't know that they are friends? Gabriel was amused. So, instead of leaving, he decided to stay there and pretend to be checking the Eurocopter, so that he could see what was going to happen next. He was curious about this thing that had just happened in front of him, when it normally happened in movies and telenovelas. After looking at each other, the 4 began speaking again, answering the question that had been asked. Jack, we met in Venture City. Celine, they are my best friends. Wendy, she is my best friend. Angie, she is my best friend. Again, they spoke at the same time. And since they were expecting that the others would let them finish what they were saying, none of them stopped until they completed what they were saying. There was another moment of silence as the 4 looked at each other, not sure what to say. On the other hand, Gabriel was already stifling his laughter. He really wanted to laugh out loud, but he was worried that he would disrupt the plot. So, he managed to hold back the laughter. There was a silence that lasted for almost 30 seconds. Each of the 4 was waiting for someone to speak, and seeing that nobody was going to speak, they decided to speak. Jack, okay, Celine, it's like this. Wendy, Let me explain. Angie, this is how. Again, there was silence as each of them stopped mid-sentence upon noticing that there was someone else that was speaking. In the end, they all stopped what they were saying and decided to listen. Gabriel couldn't hold it in anymore and began chuckling. Although he had tried so much to hold on, he just couldn't. After all, this was just too much. Even in telenovelas, for four people to be in such a situation at the same time, he had never seen or heard of it. Although they only said the same words at the beginning, the following actions were similar, although the words were different. It was like their bodies were in sync, but their brains thought of different words to say. Or, they only had different vocabularies. Ha 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 ha. Looking at the blushing girls and the awkward Jack, Gabriel completely burst out laughing while holding his stomach. He was no longer chuckling, but was really loud. His laughter brought the four out of the deadlock where they didn't know what to say or do next. While the girls blushed even more furiously, Jack smiled awkwardly and gazed at Gabriel and complained, "Come on, dude, what are you laughing at?" Gabriel continued laughing a little while longer before he replied. But all the same, he was still having an urge to continue laughing. "Haha, what can I do? You guys are so funny," Gabriel replied. During the time that he'd spent with Jack, they had gotten along with each other. So, Gabriel could joke and be casual around Jack. The same could be applied to Jack. Jack shook his head and turned to the three girls and said, "Let's get to the mansion and have a talk." The girls nodded and followed Jack down the roof of the garage, following the usual staircase. They arrived in the room, leaving behind Gabriel, who was still in a fit of laughter. After they took their seats in the Prince Palace, they again remained silent for a while, not sure who was going to start speaking. As a man, Jack decided to take the initiative to speak. So, he cleared his throat and was just about to speak when Celine cut in. "Jack, these two are my friends. They are Wendy and Angie, but I think that the three of you know each other. Wendy, Angie, this is Jack, the owner of this mansion. He's been helping me here in Inchoate City," Celine said as she gazed at the two. Well, I don't think I need to reintroduce the relationship between Celine and I. So, I can say that Jack and I are acquaintances. We met in Crystal City 1 year ago, and last week in Venture City. Wendy spoke. She had decided not to speak about the engagement between the two of them in Jack's presence. He had already said that he didn't acknowledge the engagement. Just to make sure that the relationship that was already weak wouldn't collapse, she wasn't ready to say something that would displease Jack. Seeing that the ladies had explained the relationship between them, Jack decided not to meddle and let things be as they were. Additionally, he was impressed that Wendy didn't say that he was her fiancé. Had she actually insisted that he was her fiancé, he would definitely make sure that he maintained a good distance from her. He didn't recognize the engagement, and neither did he know Wendy for him to actually agree to it. On the other hand, Angie frowned. Wendy actually said that she and Jack were actually acquaintances? This was completely out of her expectations. Hadn't Wendy told her that the two of them were engaged? What the heck with this acquaintances nonsense? She was just about to ask what was going on when she felt Wendy's grip on her hand. Seeing that Wendy was shaking her head at her, she decided not to say a word. At least for now, she wouldn't say a word and wait till they were alone. She would have to get answers from this lady. Having cleared everything, the group chatted for a few minutes before Jack went upstairs to refresh and take a rest. According to the agreement, they would be leaving at 10. So, since it was still 6 in the morning, he thought that he still had time to relax his stiff muscles a bit. After taking a shower, Jack jumped on the bed and was about to close his eyes when they shot open. That was because he had just received a system prompt that reminded him of the time that he had gotten the system. First month of income earning. Rewarded with Glaze Hotel. It was only a single prompt, but it had reminded him of something important that he had actually forgotten. But at the same time, he actually remembered that today was actually on Saturday, the first day of August. In other words, this was going to be the second month that he was going to start. Although he had gotten the system on 13th of July, the system evaluated things differently. Although it was true that it had yet to be a month since he had gotten the system used the normal calendar. So, according to the system, a month had gone by, and he had been earning during this month. Even though it was only from betting in the grocery department, at least, he had earned something big. Additionally, All the other incomes from the institutions and companies was going to be multiplied on this very day. Of course, this only applied to the security company, the hospital, and the medical research center. Then, there was another thing that he was going to receive as well. That was the first income reward. Back to what he had just received at the moment. He had just been awarded with Glaze Hotel. Just like Good Vision Security Limited, Glaze Hotel was a well-known hotel business in the country. It had several branches all over the country. Although not every city had the branch hotel, at least in Kuwait City had one. Although Jack had yet to confirm the actual value of Glaze Hotel, he was sure that it was nothing small. It had to be worth at least $10 billion. Without wasting time, I'm thinking, he got his phone and searched for the details of the hotel. And soon, he found the results that he was looking for. Glaze Hotel, a 5-star hotel with branches in over 30 cities in the country. Azima country itself had 5 provinces: Eastern, Western, Northern, Southern, and finally Central Province. Amongst the 5 provinces, the Central Province was the leading one in terms of technological development. It was also where the capital was located. As for the other 4 provinces, they were far bigger than the Central Province. But, at the end of the day, they were the least developed. The reason for this being the fact that the current leader of the country was someone who thought that centralization was better. In other words, he thought that it was better to have the Central Province developed first before the fruits of the development are spread to the other 5 provinces. So, the other 4 provinces were actually not that much developed. Although they were not completely ignored, it was true that they were still lagging behind. The only saving grace of the 4 provinces was that they were the main source of food in the country. Since there was a lot of space, there were several plantations in the 4 provinces that were enough to satisfy the population with food. But of course, there were other things that had to be imported from other countries, as it was obvious that the climate in the country couldn't support every type of crop. Back to the topic, in Azima country, there were 57 cities. With Glaze Hotel already spreading to 30 cities, one could see that it had covered over half of the cities. The main focus of the hotel was obviously the Central Province. The region had 7 cities. These 6 cities had been greatly developed just like Khartoum City. So, Glaze Hotel had spread to these 7 cities. And after that, there were a few other cities that were randomly selected to have a branch. But the top management of the hotel had plans to have the hotel spreading to all cities in the country. But it seemed that he would have to take on that. After calming down a little, Jack thought of something that he had always not thought of before. How does the system actually get these assets? You don't have to worry about that. The system has already created a group that can be viewed as a legal one. This group has money. So, it is assumed by others that the group bought the companies or shares for you. So, all that you need to do is to put your signature and everything will be solved. One more thing, if the bank investigates the money that is coming to your account, once the multiplier effect takes place, they would find that the source is the group. Jack was amazed by the system. It actually had such an ability. He was now curious about the group that the system had made. What's the name of this group? Don't mind that. You'll know about it in the future. Maybe you will be rewarded with that group as long as you complete a certain requirement, or there is a need for that to happen. Jack shook his head. The system was actually trying to play mysterious here. Anyway, since it was said that he would know about it in the future, he decided to not think about it for the time being. But then, he came with an idea that made him excited. System, can you help me with the issues of the signatures? I don't want to start moving around in the future just for a signature. The system was silent for a moment before finally replying. The role of the system here is to make sure that the host knows the importance of working hard. If you are lazy to even move around to sign the transfer agreement, won't the system actually being hosted by a lazy host? Jack had his mouth hanging for a while. He was actually speechless. What the heck with the system? Wasn't it just a signature? Anyway, Jack thought for a moment before replying. Just imagine that I will have to get from the southern province and head to the northern province, all just so as to put a signature? Won't that be a waste of time? Jack then continued, that time could be used by me to do other things. It's not like I will be idling. One more thing, the time that I will be spending on the plane while traveling, wouldn't I be lazing around? You can just ask them to bring the contract to you. He actually didn't know what to say for a moment, but, as a human, he obviously had something to say. but I will have to set time aside just to put a signature. The time that I will be going through the documents and chatting with the one that brought the agreement over, that would be a waste of time. There was no reply again for a period of time. Then, the reply came only after 2 minutes. Okay then. The system will help you in completing all the procedures for the transfer of the shares and other assets. But, in return, with every company you get, you will have half a year to increase the net value by 100%. Jack was at first satisfied, but when he heard the condition for that to happen, he couldn't help but want to complain. But, thinking about the situation, he thought that all the same, he was going to increase the value of the companies. As for the half-a-year timeline, he was sure that he would manage. With time, he was sure that his influence would have grown to a greater extent and that he would be able to easily solve that problem. Jack was so confident about this and that he forgot about something important. The net worth of a company didn't simply depend on the amount of money that was invested. It needed more than that. A good example would be the research institutions. No matter the amount of money, unless the scientists managed to complete the research and had gotten positive results, the amount of money wouldn't matter. Then, another system prompt appeared. This time, Jack was clearly even more excited about what was coming next. Get ready, the income of the companies that are multiplied on a monthly basis is up next. Be prepared. Immediately after that, the prompts began coming in. You've earned $34.5 million from Good Vision Security Limited, Amber Securities, and Safety Enforcers in the previous month. Multiplier applied. You receive $3.45 billion. First income. As a reward, you gain 3 mil 26M helicopters. You've earned $76.3 million from Brightway Medical Research Center and Hope Hospital in the previous month. Multiplier applied. You receive $7.63 billion. First income. As a reward, you gain a comprehensive speed CT scanner and the recipe for the anti-leukemia pills. Do you want to get the first income reward of the grocery department, or would you still like to continue accumulating? 5 system prompts came in one after the other, and followed by that was the vibration of his phone to indicate that there was money that had been received in his account. Jack took a deep breath and replied, "Let it continue accumulating. I will retrieve the reward when necessary." He had been saving the first income reward of the new grocery stores that he had been buying so far, just to make sure that the reward that he would receive would be of high quality. Jack then began analyzing the rewards one after the other. The 3 security companies had given him $34.5 million. This was the money that was earned since the moment that he had taken over. Being that most of the contracts were signed during the start of the year, it was obvious that he wasn't going to receive a lot of money till the following month. Anyway, the $34.5 million had been multiplied to a good $3.45 billion. This was a good amount of money that he had earned here. It was already boosting him towards the $50 billion account balance target. Brightway Medical Research Center and Hope Hospital had also performed quite well, giving him more than $70 million. The main income came from the research center due to the success in research during the past years. The medicine that was sold by the research center was the main income earner. Although Hope Hospital could also have been a good source of income, Jack knew that it was still lagging behind the leading hospitals. In other words, he would have to work hard to make sure that Hope Hospital caught up and surpassed the other hospitals. As for making the hospital a monopoly, Jack was sure that it was going to be impossible as the government would surely be involved. The government had several medical research and pharmaceutical companies in the country. So, if he had a dream of monopolizing the pharmaceutical industry, he would be going against the government. Now, to the rewards that he had received. This time, the system was generous enough to give him the descriptions of the rewards.
1026M helicopters.
These are heavyweight transport helicopter with twin engines. It has the following characteristics. Crew, 5 men. Length, 40 m. Main rotor diameter, 32 m. Height, 8.14 meters. Weight, empty 28.2 t. Weight, maximum takeoff 56 t. Engines, 2X ZMKB Progress D136 turboshafts. Engine power, 2x10000 shop. Maximum speed, 295 km per hour. Service ceiling, 4.6 km. Range, 1,952 kilometers. Typical load, 80 troops. Looking at that information, one could tell that these helicopters were meant for the military or something related to that. Having a carrying capacity of 80 troops, it could easily deploy the guards in case of emergencies. This was something that Jack was looking forward to. He had previously asked Maxwell to purchase 1 or 2 helicopters if possible. But now that he had been rewarded by the system, Jack was happy. He had 3 of them. Total troops that could be deployed would be 240. If he created a team that had 20 people, he would be having 12 teams. Then, each helicopter would have 4 teams. He could as well merge the 4 teams and form a platoon that had 80 men. So, each platoon would be assigned a helicopter. Although he was currently having a single team, squad, he could still ask Denali to have more of them created. Comprehensive Speed CT Scanner. A medical equipment that is used to scan a living being's body. It works at a high speed and gives out all the comprehensive details that can be found or according to the specialization of the scan. This was what came from the first income reward of Hope Hospital. This was something that was going to be delivered there. But of course, Jack wouldn't do such a thing at the moment. He would make sure that he owned 100% of the shares of the hospital first. Currently, he was holding 70% shares. The total value of the hospital was $500 million. So, in his hands, there was $350 million. The remaining 30% shares could be acquired after spending about $200 million. Of course, the 30% was worth $150 million, but to get them as fast as possible, he could as well offer $200 million. Anti-leukemia pills. These are the pills that can prevent a person from getting blood cancer. In other words, even if one experiences the high radiations, he would definitely not get leukemia. Note, the pill immunizes a person who doesn't have leukemia to make sure that he wouldn't be affected by leukemia. But if a person plays with dangerous radiations, the immunization wouldn't help that person escape from the other effects that come from the radiation. It does not heal leukemia. That was something that he had been looking forward to a lot. The recipe that would boost the reputation and value of Brightway Medical Research Center. Although the pills couldn't heal leukemia, they would definitely prevent any further cases of leukemia. In other words, as long as the current generation received the anti-leukemia pills, she would definitely not suffer from leukemia. Jack was extremely excited. After the production of the body-strengthening pill was completed, he would definitely make sure that the anti-leukemia pills were produced. Although it would take a good period of time for the pills to go through the clinical trials and the approval from the medical department, he was sure that it wouldn't take more than 2 months. As Jack was busy with the rewards that he had received, the girls, on the other hand, were chatting with each other, trying to understand the relationship between Jack and the other one. "You mean that you and Jack are engaged?" Celine asked as she looked at Wendy in disbelief. She couldn't believe that Wendy had already gotten engaged. Additionally, there was a pang of pain in her heart as she thought that Jack had a fiancé already. She felt that she had lost something important, and she couldn't help but feel dejected. Yes, but, I was the one that suggested the engagement. I told my grandpa that I loved Jack. So, we went to Jack's home and my grandpa and Jack's father came to an agreement that the 2 of us can be engaged. Wendy replied. She could tell that Celine definitely had feelings for Jack, but she too had feelings for him and they were intense. She just couldn't give up on him. "You know Jack's family?" Celine asked in a low voice. Till this time, she had never tried investigating Jack's background, hoping that he would tell her. But at the end of the day, it seemed that someone had beat her to it. "Yes, he's from Alfonso family of Crystal City," Wendy replied. But at the same time, she was doubtful about this. After all, the Bugatti Veyron, the cars that were bought out there, the mansion, the Eurocopter, these things totally didn't add up to Jack's background at all. Even if Jack was the most favored young master of the Alfonso family, she was sure that there was no way that he could get all these things. Additionally, Alfonso family was at a lower level as compared to her family. And since her family didn't have the connections to get the Bugatti Veyron, how could the Alfonso family? She was wondering if it was true that Jack owned this place, or if he was living in someone else's house. Alfonso family? Why does it sound familiar? Although this was the first time that she was hearing this name, Celine felt that this wasn't the case. There was some sense of familiarity to this name, but she couldn't make out where the familiarity came from. After thinking without getting anything, she simply shook her head. Thinking of Crystal City, Celine continued doubting whether it was true that Jack was from that family. The way that Jack was spending money was as if he had a lot of it. To buy the whole building and the cars. To buy the stores and the mansion. Since the Alfonso family was located in Crystal City, which was larger as compared to Inchoate, there was no way that they were going to waste their money to develop in a small city instead of trying to enter the market of the larger cities. Angie didn't say a word this time. She too wanted to know what was going on. At first, she was only interested in the fact that Wendy didn't say that Jack was her fiancé in his presence. But, as they talked of Jack's background, her interest grew. She was wondering what secrets he was hiding. But, for now, she had to confirm something first. Wendy, what are you trying to hide from us? In Jack's presence, you said that you two are acquaintances. Now, why would you say that? Was he threatening you? She asked with narrowed eyes.